The birthday she wasn't invited to, a story of boundaries and becoming.
Sometimes the people who share your blood can make you feel like a stranger in your own life.
This is not a story of rebellion or revenge. It's a story of quiet resilience, of finally choosing yourself after years of being invisible. And it starts with a phone call that sounded more like a warning than an invitation.
The qui est docteur? My name is Natalie.
I live about an hour outside of Boston, in a quiet town where people still nod politely when they pass each other on the street. I wake up early, make espresso in the same chipped ceramic mug I've had since grad school, and walk 1 block to the office of the biotech startup I helped build from scratch. It's not glamorous. It's not flashy. But it's mine. It took a decade of long nights, eating takeout on a lab bench, pitching to investors who called me kiddo, and quietly solving problems no one else dared to touch. I built something from nothing, with people who became my chosen family not because they had to, but because they believed in me. That kind of trust?
You don't forget it. You don't take it for granted.
Still, when I looked at my childhood home, I felt like a visitor, not a daughter. You wouldn't know it by looking at our family albums, but I exist.
Not in the way my sister Danielle does, all charm and camera ready.
She was always the star, the daughter who never made waves. My role? Supporting actress.
Background noise.
The smart one, the weird one, the one who couldn't quite be loved loudly. Danielle brought home charm and boyfriends with medical degrees. I brought home projects and late-night deadlines. She got spa days and brunch photos with mom. I got errands, airport drop-offs, and the family group chat that always left me on read. At family dinners, she was the toast. I was the napkin nobody noticed. Still, I tried. God, I tried. I thought if I paid the bills, stayed out of the spotlight, and showed up when it mattered, I'd earn my seat at the table. I remember once, years ago, I showed up for Thanksgiving after working a 16-hour day. I brought a bottle of red wine I knew Dad liked and a dessert from a bakery Mom always raved about. Danielle walked in 20 minutes late, announced she was dating a surgeon, and every conversation instantly revolved around her. Someone handed her the carving knife. I was handed the remote. I smiled. Because that's what I'd learned to do. I thought that if I could just hold on long enough, if I just kept being helpful, quiet, useful, maybe one day they'd look at me the way they looked at her. I was wrong. The call that changed everything. It was late March. The sky was the kind of pale gray that made everything look flat. But I felt electric inside. I had just closed a funding deal I'd been chasing for months. The kind that moves the needle. The kind that lets you breathe again. After clicking out of the Zoom call with the investors, I sat still for a few seconds. I should have been calling my co-founders to celebrate. But instead, I picked up the phone and dialed home. I wanted to be part of something that felt normal.
Familiar.
I had cleared my calendar to fly in early and help prep for Mom's birthday.
Nothing dramatic.
Just chopping fruit for her sangria, assembling cheese boards, setting up string lights like we used to do together before things got performative. When Dad picked up, his voice sounded distant. Not tired, not distracted, just strangely hollow, like he was reading off a script. Natalie, if possible, don't come home this year. There was a silence. The kind that stretches out and swallows you. I thought maybe he was joking. Or trying to protect me from a surprise party gone wrong. Something, anything, other than what it actually was. Danielle's bringing her new boyfriend, he explained. He's someone important. CEO of a tech firm. Very polished. It's a big deal. I waited for the but you're welcome too. But we'd love to see you. But none of that came. Instead he said it, your job, it's hard to explain. You showing up might make things awkward. I asked him point blank, do you think I'd embarrass the family? He didn't hesitate. If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father. It was like someone had reached through the line and unplugged something in my chest. I didn't cry. Not then. I just hung up the phone and stared at the espresso cup in my hand, still warm. I thought of all the birthdays I'd shown up for, all the cakes I helped bake, the flights I took with tight schedules and delayed connections. I thought of the bills I quietly paid, the extras I covered when Danielle was between jobs. All of it. Meaningless. There's something terrifying about realizing you've been cast out of your own life story, and not by accident, but by design. In that moment, I stopped being their daughter. Not because I wanted to, but because they told me to. Over the past 2 years, I had paid nearly every utility bill for their house.
Internet, water, power, câble.
Groceries, car repairs, even surprise expenses they forgot to mention until the last minute. I never questioned it. It felt like duty. Like penance for not being who they wanted. Like maybe, just maybe, if I was useful enough, I'd earn affection retroactively. I didn't even remember when it started, just that it never stopped. 1 month turned into 24. And in that time, not once did anyone ask if it was hard for me. If I could afford it. If I needed anything. That night, I logged into my bank account and cancelled everything. No big dramatic gesture.
Just a silent click.
Auto-payments, gone. Reminders, deleted. All the invisible scaffolding I had quietly built, erased in seconds. When the lights went out on Mom's birthday, my phone exploded. First Mom. Then Dad.
Then Daniel.
Not one message asked how I was. Not one mentioned the phone call that disinvited me. They only asked for solutions. Urgently. Sharply. Like I was tech support, not their daughter. Why is the internet down?
The water won't run.
Guests are arriving soon, can you call someone? Each message stripped the last remaining layer of illusion. I wasn't family. I was a fixer. A backup plan with a bank account. And then came the irony. The man they had essentially exiled me for, the polished professional boyfriend of their golden child, was about to walk into my office and report to me. Life, it seems, has a strange sense of timing. A week later, I was reviewing an internal transfer list for our Boston office. We were onboarding a team from New Jersey, finalizing new reporting lines, department roles, the usual Monday checklist. And there it was.
Liam Prescott. CFO.
Transferring to our Boston location. I stared at the name longer than I needed to. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I just leaned back in my chair and let the absurdity wash over me. The man my family had restructured a birthday around was about to walk into a building I co-founded, and call me boss. I didn't mention it to anyone. Didn't gossip. Didn't warn Danielle. Didn't even flinch when I approved the transfer. When Liam finally arrived at our office later that week, he knocked lightly on the doorframe of my glass-walled office, a leather folder in hand. He looked unsure. Like someone who had just realized the ground wasn't as solid as he thought. He said it softly, with a polite nod, "Hi boss." I met his eyes.
Morning, Liam.
And that was it.
Nos munies. Nos vengeances. Just the weight of a truth too heavy forward.
Danielle didn't reach out to apologize. Instead, she left a voicemail saying I had ruined everything. That Mom cried. That Liam seemed distant now. She called me selfish. I didn't respond. But Liam did. He sent an email that night. Short. Quietly devastating. Natalie, I didn't know. Not really. But I saw it. I saw the way they spoke to you, or didn't. I saw what they didn't say. And I want you to know, I respect you. For your work.
For your silence. For the way you stood still and let the truth speak. I read it twice.
Then closed my laptop. There was nothing left to say.
The universe had done all the talking for me.
Weeks later, my parents came to visit. No hugs.
No small talk.
Just the sharp scent of old perfume and a printed proposal on the table. They sat across from me in my living room, the very space they once deemed too sterile and too modern. Now they were here, asking for help. We've thought it through, Mom said.
You're stable now.
Your job's doing well. If possible, we're hoping you could help us with a monthly contribution, just something to cover our insurance, utilities, some leftover debt. She slid the paper forward. $2,000 a month. I said yes. But with conditions. Danielle would contribute $1,000. And they'd sign a legal agreement that upon their passing, all assets, house, savings, everything would come to me. My father's face turned red. You're giving your own parents conditions? I didn't blink. Not conditions, I said.
Bundari.
He opened his mouth to argue but stopped when he saw the calm in my face. Not anger. Not hurt. Just clarity. You called me selfish, I continued, for not doing more. But you never asked how I managed the more I already did. You assumed I'd keep giving without ever needing anything in return, not love, not thanks, not even acknowledgement. And I did. Until now. The silence between us stretched, brittle as glass. If love is conditional, I added, then so is support. They left soon after. No hugs.
No godbis.
Just the quiet click of the door and the feeling that a final thread had finally been cut. And for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I didn't write this to play the victim. I wrote it because sometimes the people we love most are the ones who make us forget we're worthy of love at all. For years, I believed love meant endurance. That if you just hung on long enough, gave more, bent farther, one day someone would turn around and notice you bleeding. But endurance without acknowledgement isn't love. It's performance. I used to replay every cold conversation in my head, wondering if I could have said something differently, softer, sweeter, smaller. Now I see those silences for what they were, the space where I shrank to make others more comfortable. It took me years to learn that love without respect is just manipulation dressed as loyalty. And that being the problem solver in a family that never asks how you're doing is a role you're allowed to walk away from. I don't hate them. I've simply stopped writing myself into a chapter where I was never meant to have dialogue. I'm just no longer funding the illusion. Freedom, for me, didn't come with fireworks. It came in the quiet moments, the way I slept better at night, laughed a little louder, reclaimed space in my own life without guilt. I no longer feel obligated to chase people who don't look back. And if you've ever been the shadow to someone else's spotlight, I hope you know, you're allowed to step out. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just fully. You're allowed to stop explaining yourself. Stop trying to prove your worth to people who've already decided to overlook it. You don't have to burn yourself down to keep anyone else warm. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it's just waking up one day and realizing the ache is quieter. That you no longer measure your value through someone else's silence. Closing lines: sometimes the best way to speak your truth is to stop showing up for the lie. It didn't start with a betrayal.
No shooting. No slamming doors.
Just a phone call, and a sentence that quietly shattered everything I thought I knew. Natalie, if possible, don't come home this year. Imagine hearing that. From your own father.
On your mother's birthday.
Not because you're busy.
Not because you've done something wrong.
But because your job, the life you've built from nothing, is too hard to explain.
Tout inconvénient.
Too much of a contrast next to your sister's perfect new boyfriend. This isn't just a story about rejection. It's about how silence can be louder than violence, and how sometimes, family isn't where you feel safest, it's where you vanish.
Welcome to Secret Affair Stories, where the truth doesn't scream, it whispers through the crack.
And tonight the crack begins, with a birthday I wasn't invited to.
Some wounds don't bleed.
They close slowly, in silence, while you learn to live without the people you once thought were home.
I never slammed the door.
I never shouted. I just stopped answering the calls that only came when something broke. Because at some point, you realize love without respect isn't love. It's debt. And I'm done paying for it with pieces of myself. I wasn't the selfish one. I was just the first to stop pretending. So if you've ever felt like the background character in your own family, maybe it's time to rewrite the script. This was my truth. And if it whispered something familiar to you, maybe it's yours too. Thanks for listening. This is Secret Affairs Stories, where silence finally speaks.